So let's walk through the Asea science. Let me say up front, this presentation is not brought to you by Asea, the company. I'm an independent associate, and the Asea product is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any disease or health condition. So let's get that out of the way right up front. But if we were to walk through the Asea science, as I've studied it, and I've just said, look, break it down to the simplest form so a second grader could understand this, I would talk about these 5 things, and the last one being weight loss and endurance. That's the athletic presentation. But I would start by talking to people about the cell and just the very basics of a cell, what happens when a cell gets damaged, what we have been doing for the last 30 years, and then what we will be doing for the next 30 plus years now that we have an understanding of redox signaling molecules, which is a fairly recent discovery in the body. And then lastly, I want to talk about glutathione. It's a natural antioxidant, very different than the consumable antioxidants that we have been hearing about through advertising and marketing on various products around the country and really around the world. But let's start there, and we'll just kind of walk through this quickly. So the human body is made up of about 75 trillion cells. Some say a little more than that, but most say right around 75 trillion cells. They all kind of act the same way. They have a nucleus. They have a cell wall that allows some things to come through and other things not to come through. And then they have multiple mitochondria. The mitochondria are the battery packs of the body. About 98% of all of our energy comes from the mitochondria. And a process there called the Krebs cycle, which takes in the foods that we eat mostly and turns them into simple sugars, glucose, etc., and runs them through a cycle where it takes that food and turns it into energy, or adenosine triphosphate, ATP. The interesting thing about the cells is that they all have this nucleus and a DNA strand that tells them how to do certain things. And you say, well, you know, some cells require a lot more energy and therefore would have many, many mitochondria. In some cases, they've found single cells with over 5,000 mitochondria. That would obviously be something that would require a lot of energy. For instance, a heart, the brain requires a lot of energy, the lungs, etc. But there are other cells that don't require much energy at all. A hair cell, an eyelash, a fingernail, etc. They're all made up of cells but don't require a lot of energy, so would have fewer mitochondria. Inside those mitochondria, there is this process called the Krebs cycle. It's also called the citric acid cycle. But we take in simple sugars and it bounces across the electron transport chain and kicks off these little tiny molecules. In the end, you get ATP, or energy, and it allows you to think a thought, to blink, to run and jump and do all the things that we do and breathe. But in that process, these little tiny, what they're called Krebs cycle intermediates are spun off. You see them here in the red and the green. And up until about the turn of the century, scientists thought that those molecules were damaging and bad for you. The fact of the matter is, half of them are called ROS, and they can be very damaging. The other side, the green molecules here, are called RS, or reduced species, and they act as a balancing component to the combination. And they, if you have cells with a proper balance of those two, those cells are in a state of homeostasis or balance, and they actually help the cell to be very healthy. You can see the cell off to the right. There's a good number of both the ROS and the RS. One acts as a shield. The other one acts as an army, or the weapon of choice for the immune system. This was the one they were initially seeing under a microscope and saying, wow, these molecules are bad. They can actually do damage to good parts of the body. Well, the other component they were missing, the shield piece, actually protects the good parts of the body. So the army can actually go and identify and flag things that shouldn't be there, invading pathogens, viruses, bacteria, etc., and wipe those out with the use of helper B cells and killer T cells. What we won't go into, I think we may have touched on that on the last one, but they work in harmony and they help to take care of the body, both external and internal threats, meaning there are things that the body does not want to be in the body, and it will identify and flag those and push them out and destroy them and break them down into simple proteins and push them mostly through the liver. So again, sorry I'm talking so quickly. We've gone through this before, so I just wanted to kind of give you a high level of what we're talking about here. So all damage to the body or all diseases are a form of oxidative stress. So you say, well, why do we have so many names for them? I know that in the brain you have all different kinds of diseases, and in the heart there's different diseases, and the lungs and the liver and the skin and the eyes, etc. They all have a different name, but the common thread is that they are all in a state of oxidative stress, the cells, for that particular tissue and that organ. So oxidative stress means damaged cells. As you can see, there's an overabundance of ROS, reactive oxygen species, and those ROS molecules are doing damage to the DNA, mitochondrial DNA, and the different organelles within the cell. And that cell is not working very well. So if you've got one of these, you can generally clean it up. If you've got big sections of cells that are in a state of oxidative stress, you have damaged tissue. If it's in your eyes, you're not seeing well. If it's in your lungs, you're not breathing well. If it's in your liver, you're not cleaning the body up very well. Same thing with the kidneys. The brain is not functioning well, and you start to see signs of that as people get older with Parkinson's and dementia and other things like that. That's simply an indication that there's oxidative stress on those cells, and the body is fighting but not winning the battle. So oxidative stress is known to be the primary, if not the leading contributor to over 200 health challenges. So that's a big number. If you think about it, we could sit down and try to list out all the things we've ever heard of people struggling with, and we might get about halfway there, but hundreds of different concerns and health challenges are defined as oxidative stress. So if we can clean this up, we will put a big dent in the healthcare costs that we're having to support in the United States, at least. So what causes oxidative stress? Stress itself, prescription drugs, excessive or no exercise, negative mental attitude, electromagnetic radiation, ultraviolet radiation, etc. The food additives and preservatives, they say that they can build a chicken ready for slaughter at 45 days. It generally takes 90. So they've chopped that in half, and you say, well, if it's only 45 days, what's that chicken made of? Excuse me. And the answer is that a lot of it is growth hormones and additives and things like that. So a lack of nutrition causes oxidative stress, and they say that over the last 80 years, there have been over 80,000 toxic industrialized chemicals poured into our environment. So we're struggling with that. We're trying to survive it, and I read an article that said that we're exposed to more pollutants in 15 minutes than our great-great-grandfathers were in their entire lifetimes. So we're up against the wall with all the things that we're struggling with. The water we drink, the air that we breathe, the food that has been fixed up and modified, and all different kinds of preservatives. And you take your hat off to those who do it right with the organic type foods, but really it's a dying breed because it's about making money, and they simply can't make money if people are growing chickens in 45 days and it takes them 90. They just can't turn a profit. So everyone's jumping on, and sadly we're dealing with a lot of pollution in our environment. So I used to think, how bad is it? Is it really that much of a concern to have all of this oxidative stress and these free radicals floating around in our body? Do we have 100 of them every day? Do we have 1 million of them every day? Can I take juices, berries, resveratrol, any kind of fruits and vegetables and chocolates and things like that to fix the problem, the antioxidants that are consumable. About 7,000 of them that I think that are known to man. And I got the answer that I was worried about, and that is that our body produces over 100 sextillion free radicals every single day. That's more than the number of blades of grass on the earth or sand or even stars in the sky. And that happens every day. And I'm reading articles that say you need to consume almost a truckload of berries and juices and antioxidants in order to combat that every single day. And, it's like saying, there's a need for toothpaste, and someone says, well, I've got a 100-pound tube of toothpaste. All of us would immediately say, don't need it. I don't need that much. I don't use that much toothpaste. But no one really has been saying, how much do you need to take care of the free radicals? They just say, I have a solution, and here it is, but no one's really telling us the full story. So the fact of the matter is, consumable antioxidants are not the answer. They're simply just not doing the job. So everything below here is showing an increase in free radical activity in our body. I'll let you look over that. We often do a health assessment before you start taking Asea. A lot of times people will start taking it and immediately start seeing some of these things go away, but they don't realize that Asea and the redox signaling molecules are helping with this. So we'll bounce through this kind of quickly. How do we combat oxidative stress? The answer has been, the last 30 years, plant or consumable antioxidants. And the issue with that is that these antioxidants that we have been consuming in our body, 90% die in the digestive tract. The other 10% move their way to the fluids of the body. But the antioxidants are so large that they can't pass through the cell wall. And you remember a slide or two ago that those cells require that to be fixed on the inside. So if you can't get in the cell wall, we're not fixing much. The messaging, the signaling of the need for repair, it's like picking up a rock and trying to call the fire department saying, I've got a problem. No one's going to come because there is no signaling. And so the body continues to get worse and worse. What I found also is that when you take those plant-derived antioxidants, they are able to eliminate exactly one free radical. And then there are some scientists that say that they themselves become a free radical. So the ratio is 1-to-1 on the plant-derived or consumable antioxidants to the free radicals. And then we have with Asea an on switch to switch on antioxidants, and that's the RS side. So the other ones say, what are you talking about, an on switch? Most of those that push these juices and berries and things like that don't know anything about that. So what can Asea do now that we have this great discovery? Certainly not an invention. The Asea molecules have been around for centuries and centuries. We just didn't know about them, and certainly didn't know that there was a way to make them outside of the body so that we could supplement the body. So the amazing thing is that the Asea molecules, which are not antioxidants, but they're sometimes about 4 atoms in size, much smaller than a water molecule usually, and they absorb quickly and easily in the mouth, sublingually, down the throat, and in the digestive system. They'll move right into the fluids of the body, and they go exactly where the body needs them. We consider the Asea molecules to be very much like cell phones because they do communicate with other parts of the body, and they signal the need for repair. So when a cell is damaged or tissue is damaged, the Asea molecules know right where to go, and they'll immediately start to clean that up. The effectiveness on this is actually over 70 million to 1 for glutathione. Some of the others are less than that, 10 million to 1. But they are catalysts, and they will clean up that number of free radicals every second. So if you think about it, we finally have an answer to all those free radicals that I was telling you about in the previous slide. You can take Asea into the body. It will pass through the cell wall. It will start to clean up cells at a rate of up to 70 million free radicals a second. When the cell is healthy, the tissue is healthy, the organ is healthy, and you're feeling a lot better, and you will actually feel a lot stronger and can do more.
Hey, Jon.
Yes.
Hey, real quick, right there. For how long will the plant or the antioxidants that Asea is creating, how long will that go on for? Is it just 1 second, 2 seconds? Does it go on for a little bit longer than that?
I've asked Gary Samuelson. He said it's actually days. So they will continue on for days. But then when the glutathione molecule, for instance, becomes ineffective, the cell itself knows to break it down, to put it back into proteins, simple proteins, glutamate, glycine, and cysteine. And the cell, if the cell is still damaged, will signal the need for NRF2 nuclear translocation and start to build another one. And it will actually pull that glutathione back together and say this cell's not fixed. So Asea will do one of two things. It will either repair the cell through that NRF2 program that's pulled off the DNA, or if it says, look, we just can't fix this one, it will replace it through apoptosis, and that cell will be disintegrated, basically pulled apart, and then over time, the surrounding cells will signal these are all liver cells, therefore build a new liver cell, and they'll pull that program from the DNA and build a new liver cell, and it's brand new. I mean, when they were initially doing the FDA testing on dogs, they found after doing the autopsy on dogs that the organs were actually pink and perfect, like brand new organs, and they say these are older dogs. So it was amazing. The dogs were drinking a ton of Asea, and the cells were becoming younger and younger. So it was pretty exciting, pretty exciting.
Thank you.
Good question. So how important is glutathione? By far, most nutritionists will say the most important molecule you need to stay healthy, most important molecule in the body. We lose 10 to 15% of our glutathione every decade, starting at about age 20. They have found that the centenarians, the people who hit 100, have abnormally large amounts of glutathione in their blood and tissue. And they say that's the common thread. There's a perfect correlation with glutathione and a healthy aging individual. And they also say that 8 out of the 10 people who are hospitalized with a chronic illness have glutathione deficiencies. So and if you think about that, if we start taking Asea, it's going to put a lot of people in the health industry out of business. So a lot of people are saying, don't take Asea. But we want to be healthy. We want to save some money, and we want to feel better. So doctors are now starting to figure it out, and they're drawing glutathione levels instead of sugar and cholesterol. There's a test called the T-bars where you can determine how much glutathione you have in your blood and tissues. The issue is that a lot of doctors are giving glutathione orally, which is killed immediately in the digestive tract, no value at all. The other group of doctors are giving glutathione intravenously. About 20% of those, it's about a $200 a month shot. And what they're finding is that there's not a lot of value to that either, because the glutathione molecule is almost 200 atoms in size and does not penetrate the cell wall, and all disease is inside the cell. So that's why Asea is so valuable. We are not a glutathione molecule, but we know how to make them, and we make them inside the cell, and that's what cleans up cells. So again, I apologize for talking so quickly. Most of this we've gone through, but it's so important that I wanted to go through it quickly. How important is glutathione? Calvin Lang, a professor of biochemistry at the University of Louisville, said, look, I've studied this for 40 years. If you have glutathione, you live longer and better, period, the end. Gene Carper, who's probably the top health and nutrition specialist in the United States, author of over 25 books on the New York Times bestseller, says, if you have glutathione, you keep your youth and live longer. High blood levels of glutathione predict good health as you age and long life. There's some interesting stats there. They did a study at the Stanford University when 25% of normal glutathione was pulled from an individual, the killer T cells became so concerned that they didn't have the support behind them, that they clumped together and they would not wage war. In fact, the body continued to have invading pathogens and things like that. And normally those killer T cells go and find them and they consume them. And they were so concerned that they literally circled the wagons and they started killing themselves. They're very, very powerful, and you've got to use them right and with a healthy balance of reduced species. Anyway, long story short, Asea increased the production of glutathione in cells and makes them 500% more effective. Same with superoxide dismutase and catalase. Amazing, amazing discovery. This is the answer that the body would give you. It is not the answer that man or a scientist would give you with all kinds of synthetic drugs and things like that. The body would say, make glutathione and clean up your cells, and that's exactly what Asea does.